Yeah, let's start the session. I would like to welcome keynote speaker of the day, Professor Perumal Nithiarasu, Research Director, Swansea University, and Deputy Head, College of Engineering, Swansea University, UK. And also, I would like to welcome Professor Nirmala Grace, Director, Center for Nanotechnology Research, CNR, Vellore Institute of Technology, for chairing the session. Now, the session is over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Loganathan. So, and I welcome all of you to this session by Professor Perumal Nithiarasu, and it's my honor to introduce Dr. Nithiarasu. Dr. Nithiarasu, today he'll be talking on prioritizing pneumonia patients for ITU and mechanical ventilation using AI. With a PhD in mechanical engineering from IIT Madras, he's been extensively working on fluid dynamics, computational fluid dynamics, finite element method, heat transfer, and biomedical engineering. He's been working in this area for more than 25 years with a cumulative publication of 420 and 39 H-index. He's the editor-in-chief of the International Journal for Numerical Methods in Biomedical Engineering, Wiley Group, and he was elected to the fellowship of the Learned Society of Wales. So with this, I welcome you, Professor Nithiarasu, and I request you to start the session. Thank you.
Right. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Hope you can see the screen, my screen now. Right. Professor Nirmala, thank you very much for the kind introduction. I would also like to thank everyone, especially Dr. Sudhakar and Professor Keitha for inviting me to deliver this presentation. So I have been asked to talk a little bit about College of Engineering at Swansea University. So I'm going to talk for a few minutes about College of Engineering, and then I'll move on to the technical presentation in a few minutes' time. So as you can see on the slide, we are celebrating the 100th year this year. Unfortunately, our celebration is kind of cut short by recent events, COVID. That's the topic of this conference. Let me quickly give you a summary of College of Engineering. So this is a top team within the College of Engineering. It's headed by Hugh Summers, and there are 4 deputy heads, and each look after different topics. I look after research within the College of Engineering. And then we have an associate head, Ruth, looks after the operational side of the college. Why we need this arrangement? The College of Engineering is the biggest college within Swansea University, as you see in the next slide. That's our fairly new campus. I think, excuse me for putting a slightly old picture. So these are all the buildings which you see on this slide. So you have Engineering North building, which is, if you can see on your screen, which seems to be being built. Unfortunately, that's a very old picture. So it's now opened and people are occupying this building. Then we have an Engineering East, which is full of material scientists, Engineering Central, where I sit and all the admin people sit. Then you have a Centers of Excellence. This is called the Institute of Structural Materials, which is a collaborative center between Rolls-Royce and Swansea University. That's a separate secure building where all the tests for Rolls-Royce are done. Then you have Energy Safety Research Institute, and also we have ongoing projects on solar. This is a building where this building generates more energy than what is required to run the building. This is one of our ongoing projects. We have a very large project with India to work on this sort of technology and translate that into remote villages. This is our structure. This may be more interesting to you. So we have research center structure. So I look after all these research centers. So we have ASTEM, which is mainly to do with sports. Then you have Energy Research Center. Then this is a Manufacturing Research Center. Then the Materials Research Center. This is a Process Engineering Research Center. This is a Computational Center. So if you have engineering background, if you know what a finite element method is, Sienkiewicz was in Swansea. He was the founding father or discoverer of finite element method. So I came particularly to Swansea because of him, to work with him on the finite element method. Then this is not a research center. This is called Learning and Teaching Technology Center, which practically looks into new ways of teaching. So these are all the research center, and that is the teaching center. Then we have all these disciplines: aerospace, chemical, civil, electrical and electronics, foundation year, and so on. These are all the teaching portfolios. So all these people sitting in the research centers will be teaching across all these disciplines. Then we also have a translational wing, more or less. I think it's called Innovation and Engagement, which looks after the engagement side or innovation side, interacting with industries and so on across the college. That's, in a brief, is our structure. And we have all these heads of research centers. So I kind of talk to them on a weekly basis to get an update across the College of Engineering, to see what's going on in this research center, what sort of project they're working on. Is there any issues with academics within those research centers? Well, I'm not going into the details of all these programs, but I just want to mention that all the disciplines we run all undergraduate programs, master's programs, and also research programs. Research programs, if you are interested, runs from MSc research, which is kind of takes 1 to 2 years. We have MPhil programs, short research programs. We also run a large number of PhD programs in different areas of research. A PhD funding is often available, but recent events looks like is going to unfortunately reduce the funding availability for international students. So we normally fund international students, but the current situation is kind of moving us slightly away from our funding model. Again, these are all the centers of excellence. So we have about 9 to 10. These are all dynamic, and we are generating more centers of excellence as we talk. And our research themes can be classified into 4 distinctive areas. As you can see, the first one is digital and computational engineering. So majority of the colleagues work with the computer in some form or other. Health, well-being, and sport is a big theme. It's a very a highly interdisciplinary theme. It's kind of runs across the college and between the colleges. Water and energy is another big theme. And finally, materials and manufacturing. So almost every activity in terms of research within the college can be classified into one of these 4 categories. I belongs to health and well-being, so I work at the interface between engineering and medicine. That's why I belongs to health, well-being, and sport. So you may also notice that the engineering has the sports department within engineering. This is a very unique setup we got in Swansea. Not many places have this facility. A sports science department sitting inside engineering is kind of unusual. That creates lots of interdisciplinary research. For example, the sports scientists use lots of engineering technology. So when sports scientists and engineers get together, you can create new ideas and new products. That's kind of ongoing. So if you want to know a little bit about statistics, so since 2010, as you can see, the research funding is about 180 million pounds. So that's roughly works out to be 1,800 crore rupees in terms of Indian rupees in the last 10 years. RAF is the way of assessing the quality of research in the College of Engineering. It normally takes place every 5 years across the country. In the last one, in 2014, engineering was ranked 10th in the UK. Sports and exercise was 5th in the UK. And if you go down to the 4th point, bullet points, you can see that 94% of our research is considered as internationally or world leading or internationally excellent. This is one which is quite important for research. I think if we can be in the top 10, that's normally very good. Right. So in the case of a research environment, because we have a new campus, etc., we are actually second in the UK for providing a research environment, as you can see here. Only Cambridge University beaten us narrowly in terms of providing excellent environment for research. I really don't have any more about research, but we have plenty of slides about teaching and who we actually work with in terms of accrediting our courses, etc. I am going to assume that this is not very interesting to you, and I'm going to stop there, but I'll be very, very happy to answer you any questions related to engineering later on if you had any. With that, I'm going to switch to the next, my technical presentation, if that's okay. Is that okay?
Yeah, yes, Dr. You can proceed.
Right, so let me see whether I can run my presentation. Can you see my cursor, Professor Nirmala?
Yes, Doctor. Yes. Yeah, you can,
you can see the pointer, yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
You can get started.
Thank you. Right, so I'm going to, next few minutes, I'm going to talk about the recent research we have done on COVID, because this is a conference about COVID, and my presentation is going to be slightly different to what you probably listened before. This is coming on the treatment side in terms of prioritizing patients rather than looking for a drug. This is a slightly different research, so I have to really acknowledge my student, Neeraj. He is in his second year. So we saw an opportunity and did some work. Let me give you a little bit of a background why we started doing it. I think if you go back to March, April, in the UK, everything was kind of shutting down. We are all told to go home and work from home. And then also there was a huge expectation that the UK may run out of intensive care unit beds. Right, intensive care unit or intensive therapy unit, ITU. So I'm going to use the acronym ITU. So at that point, we thought, okay, if we run out of intensive care beds, right, or if the care bed is so big that we may end up kind of choosing patients. So you have to choose patients to go into intensive care or to get mechanical ventilation, which is again, which it was in short supply. The expectation was at some point we may not have enough mechanical ventilators. Fortunately, none of that happened, and the UK government and also Indian government was preparing for this sort of emergency. So UK started building new hospitals, and if I heard India kind of started converting some of the trains into intensive care units with beds. So there was an expectation that we may end up getting large number of critical patients. That's the reason why we started working on it. That's the background. So how we want to work with such a situation. So imagine that there is only a limited number of intensive care beds and mechanical ventilators, but we have double the number of patients waiting to get into ITU. So how do we get the first patient, right? How do we choose the patient in such a way that we can give the ITU beds and mechanical ventilator to the right patient? Okay, that's the question, and the system a little bit better, and then create a prioritization algorithm or a system, and we can use it. We can use different sort of tools to do that, but we decided to use artificial intelligence. The reason why we decided to use artificial intelligence will be very clear as we go through this presentation. So before I go into the details of my technical talk, let me briefly introduce my group in biomedical engineering. So this is the group of 11, I think 10 academics and one research fellow. So they are all from all over the world. I think this is what I like. I think apart from Jason Carson here, this one, he's a research fellow. He's the only one graduated from Swansea. Adisola came from Hong Kong. Hari came from Imperial College. Alberto came from Cardiff. Cleon came from Manchester. Raul came from Eindhoven in Netherlands. Myself graduated from IIT Madras. Sanjay came from Southampton, but his undergraduate is from IIT Kanpur. Igor came from Moscow. Chenguan Wang graduated from Canada. And finally, Fei, who came from Ireland. He got his PhD from Ireland. So this is a very young group. As you can see, majority of them are kind of emerging leaders in different areas of biomedical engineering. So you can also read the different areas of expertise they have. In case if you have an interest to contact any of them, please feel free to contact me or the individuals in the group. Okay, so now let me go back to my technical presentation. So I have organized the presentation into these categories. So let me give you a slightly more background. And then I'll also talk about current practice. What do they actually do when a patient is coming to hospital? Say a COVID patient with a little bit of a breathing difficulty coming into the hospital, what do they actually do? And how do they determine the priority? How do they actually know really send the patient to the ITU unit? Right. So there's lots of guesswork involved, and also there are score sheets used by healthcare workers to determine whether this patient should go to a critical care unit or not. And then I'll talk about a proposed system which has a three-tiered system. The current practice of using scoring system is static. With the AI, we can actually move beyond static. We can create a dynamic system which can continuously learn from the data. So you need to focus on the 2 points which are highlighted on my slide. They are the three-tiered approach and the digital twin. Okay, so you need to know what they come. And as a part of doing AI, you need to also know a little bit of neural networks. I'm pretty sure many of you probably are very familiar with neural networks. But anyway, I will give you a very, very brief introduction to neural networks. and then I'll talk about results, right? So remember, what we are doing is not yet prioritizing patients. What we have done is created a calculator, a system, and verified the system works. So we are going to the next stage now. We are trying to get access to COVID patients. That's where the future work comes. So once you have established a calculator, an AI algorithm, you can actually go to the next stage of prioritizing patients. This is not necessarily a short-term work. So because it's a dynamic calculator, people can use this for any other similar diseases to prioritize patients to go into the ITU. Okay, so this is the background. Okay, so I already mentioned to you that there was lots of discussions about running out. Or the word used is overwhelming our health service with the numbers. So the government strategy was very simple. You really don't want one big peak of COVID patients. You really want a smaller multiple peaks so you can manage the number of beds very effectively. So this is a graph Neeraj produced for me. So normally what happens, this is a UK data. So if you look at normal, this is a blue curve, right? So you are really talking about the death rate of ITU patients of about 20%. Okay, so when we combine that with COVID, almost 50% of the patients going into ITU were dying. So you can see that the COVID almost doubled the number of deaths or mortality rate. Obviously, with the time, that's now kind of tapering off. The peak is gone in the UK at least, and now things are kind of going to the next stage. Lockdown is being relaxed, etc. So we were actually focusing at this point, right? What do we do? If the beds are, we ran out of beds, what we do? Unfortunately, never happened, but it may still happen in the future. So what is the current practice? I think this is very interesting. I think some of you listening to this talk may have a medical background. I think this is how medicine normally works. So let me focus on this this scoring system. It's called Apache, which was developed for pneumonia patients. Remember, the COVID patients in the severe cases get pneumonia, lungs is completely blocked, they cannot get the oxygen to the blood. As a result, they might die. Okay, so this Apache calculator was developed for pneumonia patients. So people were using this calculator to decide, in some cases, whether the patient should be admitted to ITU or not. So you can actually look how the clinical research work here. For example, if you take a temperature of a patient, if the temperature is above 41, the point given is 4. Similarly, if the temperature is less than 30, the point is again given is 4. These are all the very severe cases on both sides. So you can also look at all these indicators. There are 9 of them here, and they all have values. And based on these values, doctors allocate points. And then all these points are summed up. Okay, so all these the 12 points here are kind of summed up to create a summation. And then they also add age and chronic health, and then all together it'll give you the so-called Apache score, right? So for example, based on the doctor's experience and guesswork, if this score A plus B plus C, which is adds all these up, if that goes beyond 25, there is a 50% chance of this person dying. Okay, so if that score goes higher to 45, then the chances of dying goes up to 80%. Okay, so this score somehow helps you. So as soon as you calculate that the probability of death out of these calculator, you can then decide whether to send the patient immediately to ITU or to put the patient on a ventilator. The problem with this is very simple. There's lots of guesswork involved. lots of calculation involved. Nothing is automatic. And then it's also limited by the data. So once the calculator is created based on the data from the past, to change this calculator, you have to go back again, do the clinical study, and then revise this kind of manually, right? And that means it's not adaptive. So as the data comes in, you cannot continuously improve it, because you have to really do it all over again. This is where artificial intelligence is clever and different, right? So once you have created a computer-based artificial intelligent algorithm, as and when data comes in, it continuously learns and adjusts accuracy based on the data coming in. So that means you can create a dynamic system which can be refined by anyone across the world using AI. So that's the idea behind the system we have developed. Let me what that idea is. Okay, so this is much more comprehensive than a single value using Apache's core. So what you see on the slide is the system we are using. This is called a 3-tier system. So imagine a COVID patient with a breathing difficulty comes in, and this is the initial stage where the patient is admitted, and then the nurse or the healthcare worker is measuring a few vital signs, and then they have to decide what to do with the patient, whether to send it to ITU or whether to send it to a normal unit. That's exactly what's happening here at this first stage. And then based on the measurements we get from this stage, we can create probabilities. In this case, in our case, only 2 probabilities. One is the probability of death based on the vital signs. The other is the probability of requiring mechanical ventilation. So once we have that, we can decide whether to send the patient to the ITU or not. This is where the patient moves to next. This is the ITU, where we need to decide whether we need to assign a mechanical ventilator or not. Again, we can use AI to do that. Not only that, once we have started the treatment, we can also discontinue based on the continuous measurement. So in the first stage, we have static measurements, maybe once in 12 hours. When it comes to ITU, it's a continuous measurement. And when you want to discontinue, it's also continuous measurements. So we need to go from static to dynamic measurements and finally discontinue and discharge the patient. So this is very comprehensive, right? Unlike the scoring systems used by clinicians at the moment, this can evolve and adapt with time. Let me give you a little bit more information. One of the things you need to remember, as soon as a patient comes, everything is designed for that particular patient. So we have lots of background calculator running, and then you're really creating a digital version of this individual patient and continuously monitoring. That means we need to really build that something called digital twin. Okay, so these treatments are individualized. I can talk for hours about digital twin. Unfortunately, I don't have that much time. So I'm going to give you a very, very quick introduction to digital twin with an example. And then you need to somehow imagine how this is applied to COVID patients. So imagine that, you are all kind of familiar. These are all pressure waveforms coming out of different parts of a human body. So that's coming from a femoral artery, that's from brachial artery in the arms, and that comes from a carotid artery. Okay, so these 3 can be easily measured. Okay, this is important. So we can put a measuring device and measure these waveforms with time. Okay, that's how the blood pressure waveform looks like. My question is here. Okay, so if I measure these 3 points, can I actually predict the waveforms inside? Okay, that's a question. So in order to do that, what we need is an intermediate stage. So the patient comes in, you're measuring 3 points. Somehow we need to build up this arterial network, which we can build up based on the height of the patient, weight of the patient, a few other measurements. We can actually build up an arterial system. So now next stage, how can I predict? Okay, I have a kind of a digital copy, physical copy of the patient. Now, how do I know the waveforms I'm predicting inside using this input, and this input is going to be correct? This is where the artificial intelligence comes. So in order to do that, we need to really go back to the history and look at a large number of similar patients. So in a simplistic sense, what AI is practically doing, taking these inputs measured on a patient and taking this one, which is the a patient's arterial network, and trying to match with the history of the different patients and come up with, oh, I found a match, and now I have the waveforms inside from the history. Okay, that training is quite important. How much time I got? 5 minutes, I guess. Right. So now you have to imagine that what can we do, right, by learning from similar patients, similar COVID patients, and then when the new patient comes, somehow you look into the history and match it with the new patient and tell them, okay, that patient had mechanical ventilator, that patient was admitted to ITU, therefore this new patient with that sort of history should be admitted to the ITU. Okay, so neural networks, I think I'm looking at the time, I'm already 30 minutes, so I have 5 minutes left. So I'm going to quickly run through. So neural networks are nothing really complicated. So here is a good example, a good and simple example. So I have calories, carbs, and proteins of, say, for example, apple, but I did not know whether that's an apple or not. So I am trying to figure out whether what calorie, 100 calorie, few grams of carbs and few grams of proteins. Can I find this as an apple? Okay. So which works through these hidden layers, etc., and finally finds a probability distribution, and that probability distribution will tell me whether this is an apple or a group of fruits. Okay, so I think there are lots of simple mathematics involved. I'm not going to go into the details in the interest of time, and then we can actually pinpoint using neural networks after several iterations, pinpoint this group which kind of contains 100 calories. I think this is a simple example. As you can see, the probability associated with this group, as you can see, is quite high. Okay, so that's exactly what we are trying to do with the COVID patients. We want to find out whether the probability of death and probability of requiring mechanical ventilation for a particular patient is high or not, right? So again, these are very complex AI networks. So we at the first stage of admission, we use the so-called MLP. So you have multiple inputs. I think that we use about 21 measurements, 21 to 22 measurements. And finally, at this point, we find out whether there is the probability of death is high enough so that we can send the patient to the ITU. And when it comes to this slide, once the patient is admitted to ITU, that's a second stage. We are continuously measuring all the vital signs. So we need continuous inputs as well as the original discrete inputs. That's why you need to change the algorithm a little bit to account for continuous measurements. Okay, these are all the results. I'm close to finish, Sudhakar.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Close to finish.
Yes, thank you so much for your excellent introduction about the. You want to talk more, Professor?
Yeah, do I have time?
Yeah, you can take 1 or 2 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just explain only this graph, and then I'll go to the conclusion. So using the neural networks, now we can assess whether what we are doing is correct or not. Okay, this is a graph which kind of, I think, again, it takes another 15 minutes to explain what this graph is about if you are not familiar. If you are in medical side, normally this is familiar. Okay, so these are all called true positive rate, and on the x-axis called false positive rate. Ideally, the area under this graph should be 100%. Then your algorithm is perfect, meaning you're not making any mistake, right? This blue curve is the AI gives us. This is the red curve, which is given by the existing calculator the clinicians are using, right? So as you can see, AI is much better than the calculator used by the clinician. Not only that, if we increase the number of data further, this curve is going to go up and up and going to fill the entire space. That's the beauty of AI. Okay, so all other graphs are similar. So if your data falls here, if your algorithm predicts here, that means at the middle of the graph, that means the algorithm is telling you that the patient may be either dead or alive. It doesn't give you precisely what the probability is, right? So there are 3 tiers data, and then now we are going to use something called transfer learning. So because we have trained this AI algorithm on the pneumonia patients, not on COVID pneumonia patients, other pneumonia patients, now we need COVID pneumonia patients to do something called transfer learning. Once we have done, we'll be confidently be able to use AI algorithm to prioritize patients. So here, these are all the conclusions. They are not difficult. You can read them. Thanks, Sudhakar. That's all.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation about the introduction about the College of Engineering, Swansea University, and as well as how the AI is really used in the COVID crisis time. So we have received a very, very nice questions from the participants. I want to get through a few questions to you. A simple one. How much time will take Apache 2 score?
To do the calculations.
Yes, Professor.
It doesn't take a lot of time. It's the approximate nature of that scale, right? So you need to really, if you have all the measurements from the patients, just put it into add the data value. Then when the value comes out like as 25, the question is to the clinician whether the clinician now the judgment comes whether you want to send the patient to the clinic or not, right?
Yes.
So in the case of AI, that's more or less done automatically by AI.
Okay, and thanks, Professor. And another question is, how much accuracy maintained for first patient, that means previous, to implement to subsequent patient in deciding advanced treatment? I think they're asking about the accuracy.
Yeah, so this is a good question. Accuracy is very, very related. One thing which I haven't mentioned, it's a clever question, I have to admit. One thing I have to mention, I create new accuracy. Don't get it wrong, right? AI is looking for accuracy within the data, meaning the past data is created by human, right? That could be wrong, right? So the accuracy is within the human error you are looking for. So the AI simply takes all these, create a system to find the right value within that data, right? So accuracy is a kind of a debatable one. There's nothing like, it's 100% accurate, etc. It's very difficult to define. What we can do within the data, can we confidently predict the prioritization? We can, but the data could be wrong.
Thank you, Professor. The last, a simple question. It's maybe you are a excellent teacher. It's a fundamental point of view. They're asking, what is weights and bias?
Can I
They're asking a
Can you
fundamental
repeat?
question. What is weights and bias?
Right. So again, I think it takes a very long time to explain, right? So
Okay.
so the weights are, it's like, you have 4 different components, right?
Okay.
Of say, for example, right? If you're trying to lose weight, for example, somebody is overweight and trying to lose weight, so they may have a dietary plan, right?
Yes.
And dietary plan may include a little bit of eating fat, a little bit of protein, a little bit of carbohydrates, right? So now you want to adjust this by multiplying something. So the calorie comes out as 2000 calories a day. So that the multiplying these 3 with the value is called weight, each and every component to get to the right final value. Okay, that's weight. The bias is a kind of a fudge factor in the case of AI. You're really trying to do somehow direct the AI to go in a certain direction by putting an additional value into the system. So again, we can talk a lot about this, but I think I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Professor. Actually, in fact, around 530 participants has been joined in your presentation, and they are keep on raising the question. Probably after the presentation, I will summarize the questions and send to your email. Once again, thank you very much, Professor. And in fact, I would like to thank Professor Nirmala Grace. Due to the internet issue, she couldn't join with us. And I think Dr. Logu, please, I think Professor Geeta ma'am or anyone, please.
Yeah, now I will invite Professor Geeta Manivasagam, Director CBCMT, to conclude the session.
Thank you, Professor Arsu, for your excellent overview about your research centers. And we find that we have a lot of interest on different aspects and different members who are working there. And also, it was very interesting, your talk on how AI is used in this critical period. And it was very new. I think for many of us, it's a very new area and it is interesting. All of us were like very keen on understanding how AI works in this kind of research. I would like to ask, AI basically depends upon the data set. So what will be the minimum data set required to have a good, reasonable output from AI? Because that is going to be a big challenge everywhere, I suppose.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's not easy to define, right? So the only way we define is more data, it's better.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the minimum data depends on the quality of data.
Okay.
If you're
I think net problem, I think.
Yeah.
what more data is, especially with everywhere data is spread around, then you need a massive amount of data. I think I forgot to mention in the case of in our case, we have access to quite a few databases, and the 2 databases we use, there are 260,000 patient data.
Oh, great.
From there, we have to screen out the pneumonia patients, right? The correct pneumonia patients. So we used 2 tests, two data sets, one with about 1,800 patients, the another with the 1,600 patients. One is focused on a probability of death, the other focused on probability of mechanical ventilation. So, I mean, we are kind of satisfied with that number. Not having said that, if I have more data, our calculator becomes better.
Okay. Thank you very much for the interesting talk and looking
Thank you,
forward
Professor.
to visit to India. Thank you.
You
Thank
are
you,
very
Professor.
well. I'm checking out, huh?
Yeah.
Yes, Professor. Yes, please.
Thank you for listening to me. Thank you. Take care.
Take care, Professor. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thank you all the participants for participating in this particular session, and also please participate in the next technical sessions. We have 3 more early career researcher talks. The next session will start at 5:15 p.m. please join us in the next session. Dear panelists, who are joined now, please, we shall be closing now. Please rejoin in using the same link. Thank you all.